Good morning. It is June 13th. That means it's Friday the 13th. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong today. Our weather conditions are taking a turn for the more traditional Ohio summer weather, where we have heat and we do look like we're going to start to see some consistent rainfall that is going to potentially cause more problems going forward over the next week. And so that's going to kind of start to put superintendents and turfgrass managers into a more prominent role. Expectations are that trying to keep things dry and keeping diseases out of activity or causing problems are going to be somewhat limited. So if you have not made any applications and you're looking at your window, today is it. And that probably doesn't help much if you don't read this or listen to it until Monday. But online today, we've got Dr. Dave Gardner, Dr. Drs Shetlar, and the inimitable Pam Sherratt. David Gardner, what's going on with weeds?
What is going on with weeds? Well, I was just out this morning finishing a trial where I was looking at various granular herbicides for the control of dandelion and clover. So, uh, different active ingredients on a fertilizer carrier. And I almost got stung several times. Uh, and it reminded me of all of my criticism of No May. Look, as an initiative, I think it's not a horrible idea. It's just the timing is unfortunate given that in May, grass is growing like crazy. And so not mowing it is a problem agronomically for it, but also the clover really isn't coming into its own as far as blooming until this time of the year. So I still think that in this part of the world, no mow May should actually be no mow June. That would make more sense. But last week I was asked to talk a little bit about the different clover type weeds that we see in lawns. And the one that's by far and away the most common is white clover. So trifoliate leaf, where all three of the leaves are joined together, and it has a white flower on it, hence the common name. Until about the 1960s, clover and grass was planted together on purpose in residential settings. It wasn't until the advent of lawn care companies that we started to see the shift more towards, the manicured, monostand of grass. But white clover is a very common weed in turf that is a perennial. Because it's a perennial, you're better off trying to control this in the fall than you are at this time of the year. Usually with our herbicides, even if you think that you're getting good control, you get good control of the top growth and then all of that stuff underground that makes it a perennial. You don't get as much of the herbicide to translocate it in the springtime, and so the clover will recover over the course of the summertime. You get a lot more permanent control if you make a fall application because you get better translocation below ground. Now, something that's become more common in the last decade is this particular plant. And the first time that I was talking with some of the people that I do my herbicide work with, I was like, "Have you heard of bird's foot trefoil, bright yellow flower?" And they're like, "You mean black medic?" And I'm like, "No, bird's foot trefoil." And I think you can find this pretty easily in roadside right-of-way mixes. On farms, they love it for use in pastures. But that means that every now and again it's making its way into settings where it was maybe not intended, like residential settings. It has a very bright yellow flower on it that makes it kind of hard to miss. Also, the leaf looks just like a bird's foot, hence the common name bird's foot. But this is also a perennial species that, if you're trying to get rid of it, control is perhaps better in the fall. In stark contrast to this one, now this is Black Medic, and you see that it also has a yellow flower on it, but it is a much more muted yellow flowering effect from a distance. And also, there's some pretty obvious differences in the structure of the flower. In addition to that, when you look at the trifoliate leaf, the end leaf is separated from the other two by a little stem, a little petiole. And so it makes it pretty easy to recognize and identify this. So while I said that white clover and bird's foot trefoil you're better off trying to control in the fall, this is one that you're actually better off trying to control now because this is a summer annual. And typically what you see is that it rapidly increases in coverage in the turf during the month of May. It blooms in June and July, and then it starts to fade out after that. But this is an annual. And then we've got this strange case here. So oxalis, so this is a trifoliate leaf that's distinctly heart-shaped. Has a nice lemony tang to it too, if you've ever eaten this. Maybe I shouldn't admit to those kind of things. But you see the flower on this, also yellow, but it's a distinct five-petaled flower, which is dis quite different than what you would see with the other plants that are in what is called the bean family or the Fabaceae family. So all of those other clover-like weeds are in family Fabaceae, which is in this order Fabales that also includes a lot of our pretty flowering ornamental trees, such as eastern redbud and etc. Whereas the oxalis is actually quite distantly related. It's in a completely different order, but in addition to that, it's in a totally different branch of the plant family too. Nonetheless, in turf grass for our purposes, we tend to include oxalis, lump it in with the clovers, maybe perhaps because of the trifoliate leaf and it happens to also have a yellow flower on it. And conveniently, the same herbicides that we use to control the other clover species seem to have good activity on oxalis as well. Now, something that's occurred in the last few years is that while we've always had the annual version of oxalis, the perennial species is becoming more frequently observed in this part of the country. So there's actually a couple of different oxalis species. But when it comes to herbicides for control of clovers, you remember I said that I was finishing up a granular herbicide study this morning where I was looking at different formulations of 2,4-D and MCPP on a fertilizer carrier. I can tell you that I've done several trials the last couple of years looking at MCPP by itself for clover control. And the conventional wisdom is that MCPP is quite effective for clover control, and it really kind of isn't by itself. And so the 2,4-D MCPP combination might be a little bit more effective for the control of clover, but it's really dicamba that is doing the heavy lifting. And so if you're trying to control clover in a residential setting, for the homeowners that are on this call, I would say that the liquid controls are much more effective than the granular controls. But if you're going to use a granular control, there are products on the market that have not only 2,4-D and MCPP, but also dicamba in them. Seek those out. You're going to be much happier with the control. That said, with a granular formulation, if you get 20% control, I call that a win. Whereas with the liquid herbicides, 80, 90% or better is, something that is usually quite obtainable. Now, for the professional applicators, fluroxapyr is the other active ingredient that we can use for the control of clover in residential settings, and that's actually what replaced clopyralid back in the year 2002. So that was kind of one of our go-to clover control herbicides, but there were some problems with its environmental persistence that resulted in it being registered not for residential use anymore. And so fluroxapyr was brought forth as the replacement for that. Again, that is much more commonly available for professional applicators. It is a more effective herbicide for the control of clover. But again, the combination of 2,4-D, MCPP, and dicamba is important because that is far more effective than the individual active ingredients, MCPP in particular, or even the 2,4-D MCPP combination. Now, for golf and sports, we have clopyralid and then haloxyphin, which also has activity on clover that are available. As far as moss goes, this one's a little bit more difficult because we don't have a lot of choices for moss control. Chemical products, there are iron-based moss control products that you can use and that's more of a long game when you're using that kind of a product. Carfentrazone is a herbicide that is often formulated into our combination herbicide products that there is a standalone registration for the control of what's called silvery thread moss, but that's only one of the moss species. If that happens to be the one, then that is potentially an option. But cultural practices are probably as or more important than attempting to get rid of moss chemically. Again, if you have a good stand of turf grass, that should be able to easily outcompete the moss that's there. And so if you have moss, it's a sign that your cultural conditions could be improved. And so reducing the irrigation frequency to the end of drying out the top surface of the soil, anything that you can do to increase air movement, improve drainage, And then, you know, in a more professional setting, you know, like a sports field or a golf course, light frequent top dressing can also aid in the elimination of moss. But as far as control goes, there's limited options. Oftentimes, you know, mechanical removal via a rake can be just as effective. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Dave. Pamela Sherratt.
Hello. So last week, we talked a little bit about, let's see, here we go. We talked a little bit about the importance of if we are going to fertilize this time of year, fertilizing with a slow release fertilizer. And Shetlar had said maybe I could come on this week and talk a little bit about how you would read a fertilizer label to determine if the product you had was slow release. So reading a fertilizer label, I don't want to preach to the choir. Probably everybody on this call already knows how to do this, but I'll just go over it again real quick. The 3 numbers on the bag represent nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium in that order. As we work through this, there's all different types. So, you know, obviously urea there, 46% nitrogen. We have blended varieties that have NPK that we would call a complete fertilizer that has all 3. We have incomplete fertilizers that don't contain all 3. While we don't have a phosphorus ban in Ohio, a lot of the companies have voluntarily taken phosphorus out. And so a lot of the homeowner products will have that middle number will be 0. But I went to a big box store yesterday to get some extra pictures, and there's a whole host of different materials out there. There's starter fertilizers for seeding. There's all-purpose. There's ones with a higher percentage of potassium in them. There's the standard sort of 4-step type products that are out there. The professional side, professional fertilizers for the professional turfgrass managers may include things like iron, manganese, sulfur, etc. So there's a whole host out there of different products for different cases, for different situations. The one thing I wanted to concentrate on really is the guaranteed analysis. So the guaranteed analysis is something that fertilizer companies must put on their products. This is regulated primarily by the Ohio Department of Agriculture. So the guaranteed analysis is basically telling you which nutrients are in the bag and where those nutrients are derived from. So if we look at this particular example here, this particular one was 26% nitrogen. 100% of that is water soluble, so quick release. And then there's potassium and iron in there. You can see that the potassium says K2O. So for both the phosphorus and the potassium, if it's P2O5 or K2O, you have to, if you wanted to know exactly how much phosphorus and potassium you have in there, you have to do a conversion. There's only 44% of actual P in the P2O5 and 88% in the actual K. So there's conversion factors there if you really want to know exactly how much phosphorus and potassium you're putting out. So let's say we have a 50-pound bag of fertilizer, 26% of that weight will be nitrogen. And then, of course, you can see there we've got 3% potash and we've got 1% iron. So that doesn't add up to 100%, right? So what is the rest of the material in the bag? Well, it's filler, and it's usually filler that's been developed to help the even distribution of the product. So the guaranteed analysis is on every fertilizer that you buy, even if you buy combination products. So if you buy, you know, a crabgrass preventer or a weed preventer or something like that, and it has lawn food in it, there will also be, as you can see here, bottom right, again, because it's regulated by the ODA, it must contain the guaranteed analysis on the label. And so here's just some examples of what those guaranteed analysis would look like in relation to the types of nitrogen. So if we look at that one on the bottom right, we can see that it's a 6% nitrogen in the bag. 5% of that is water soluble, and then we've got 0.1 water soluble, and then only about 1%, less than 1% is water insoluble. So this would be considered a water soluble source of nitrogen. Now, if we go to the one above, which is 18% nitrogen, you can see that about half of that, if you read the second line down, water insoluble nitrogen, about half of that is insoluble, which means it's coated in something, for example, and that would be a 50% slow release source of nitrogen. So what you're looking for is the words water insoluble nitrogen, or sometimes referred to as WIN, W-I-N, or water soluble. We also use terms like quick release and slow release, and that's pretty much this. That's the same thing. So we also talk a little bit when we talk about slow release sources of nitrogen. I know last week I said that the organics are slow release. So the organics are reliant upon soil microbial activity to be broken down. So they are a more slow release source of nitrogen. They are also typically more expensive, and they don't have as high a rate of nitrogen in them. So as you can see, malorganite here is 6%. I think the highest level of nitrogen that we can get out of an organic source is corn gluten meal, I think, which is about 10%. If you see an organic bag of fertilizer that's higher than about 10%, look on the back for the guaranteed analysis, because it's probably been fortified with urea. So it's hard to get nitrogen out of an organic source that's high in nitrogen. So I saw this one yesterday, the worm castings. As you can see, this is 1% nitrogen. So the organics do tend to be a little bit more expensive, and can be significantly lower in nitrogen. But if you're on an organic program, there's lots of different types out there. I will also say that a lot of the organics, especially the ones that are derived from manures and biosolids, can be pretty high in phosphorus. So if you're in an area or a state or a region where phosphorus is banned, keep that in mind. But I was pleasantly surprised yesterday just how useful and helpful the bags are now, because in addition to the things that are supposed to be on there, like, the brand, the name of the manufacturer, the weight, it will tell you how much of the lawn should be covered. I think in general, a standard is 5,000 square feet for a bag of fertilizer. It will list all the different types of spreaders and what the settings would be for those spreaders to put out a certain rate. Some of them even have like nice graphics on them, how you would calculate the lawn area that you have at your house. They have directions for use. And so the information on the bag is beyond guaranteed analysis now. So I think we've got some nice products out there. And again, if you have any questions, you can email us about that. But hopefully I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. I didn't talk about ratios too much. The ratio of NPK for a complete maintenance fertilizer is usually about 3:1:2. I think probably that is all I want. I mean, I could maybe mention the SGN. Those of you in the professional market the SGN number is the size guide number, and that will also tell us how big the prill of fertilizer is. So, an SGN of 80 to 100 would be very tiny and would be used on greens and teas. And then the larger the prill size in diameter, the larger the number of the SGN. So again, that's really more for the professional rather than the homeowner. But I think I covered everything. Hopefully, those of you that are on this call with me, if you want to add anything, now is your time to do so.
Reason why I'm saying that is that here we are pretty close to mid-June, and I have yet to see a Japanese beetle adult, and I have yet to get a mass chafer in my light trap. I did get a fair number of May-June beetles, but they overwinter as adults, so they could have escaped wet soils without a problem. Some of the other things that I'm hearing about, it was kind of a rather unusual request or comment. I got a homeowner who has an excellent Kentucky bluegrass lawn and apparently an in-ground pool, and he sent me a message and said, I've got these shiny black beetles that are in my swimming pool. I wondered what they are. And I said, well, can you fish some out and take a picture of them? And this is the picture that he sent me. And for those of you that know your beetles, obviously some of these beetles have little snouts on them. And so these are bluegrass billbug adults. And so he was obviously had lots of bluegrass billbug adults. And the only thing that I can think of is that these are recently emerged ones. So he probably, his turf didn't show any damage from the billbugs because of the moist, wet weather. And it sounded like he had a high fertility rate. So the grass was growing right through it. The reason why I mentioned that is that we've talked all season long that if you're going to be using imidacloprid or Merit-like products for your grub control, delay that application until mid-June through July. And again, if you're going to do that, this would be an excellent time to knock out a second generation of the bluegrass billbugs. If you've used longer residual materials like arena or clothianidin, acelepryn, those should be holding in anyway. Their residues will last long enough to pick up the grub populations, and those residues should hold up to take out any billbugs. Concerning the caterpillars, I'm in full swing of seeing in my light trap the adults of the sod webworms, but again, those are generally not a problem in high cut turf. They can be in the shortcut turf of golf greens and tees, but again, if you've used one of the diamides, something like a acelepryn or one of the other diamides, you should have a long residual for those for caterpillar controls, and I wouldn't worry about any sod webworms in those locations. Still haven't heard anything about chinch bugs. Dr. Wu and I, if you are in the lawn care business and are experiencing or thinking that you're seeing some chinch bug activity in neighborhoods, we'd love to hear from you, and because we're looking for some experimental study sites for that. So that's a bug update for this week, Ed.
Thank you, Dr. Shetlar. You failed to mention that the billbugs are not very smart, seeing as they've walked themselves off a cliff into a chlorinated pool and pulled them, right?
Yeah, they are inveterate walkers. They're always looking around trying to find each other, and then after finding each other, the females are ready to start laying eggs again. But they're constantly walking around. That's usually how I detect them. I see them most commonly on driveways and sidewalks, just walking around.
So the entomologist says that the male and female are walking around looking for each other. The maize, Dr. Shetlar walks around looking for them. It's a unique pair breed, folks. All right. Thank you all. We hope that we get through the next week of deluge and heat. 2-1 Pam, yes, follow up.
Sorry, I have two things. So it's Friday the 13th, right? We had a technical glitch and I said 80, I think I said 88%.
Yes, you did.
I meant 83.
All right.
So, you caught it. Nobody said anything, but and the other thing is I forgot to mention 24th of June is the OSFMA's field day at historic Crew Stadium, the Ohio Health Performance Center for the Columbus Crew. OhioTurfgrass.org is the place to register. It's going to be a great day. We've got equipment demos. We've got a tour of the stadium. It's a great networking event, supporting the organization, obviously. They're doing some great work right now. They're bringing on all kinds of partnerships. They're really looking to support research, sports turf research in the state of Ohio through us this year. So come out and support us, and there'll be some great equipment demos. And yeah, 24th of June, Historic Crew Stadium, OhioTurfgrass.org. Thank you.
And while we're freestyling here, that reminded me that when Dave Gardner was talking about the white clover in bloom and having to dodge the honeybees and maybe even some bumblebees that were out there, remember that on the neonicotinoid labels, that if you're applying a liquid application, you cannot apply that to flowering plants that are attracting pollinators. You can use the granules. Granules are not a problem. But if you do sprays, the sprays can get into the flowers themselves and get into the nectar themselves and cause problems for the bees. So be careful out there with your applications of those grub controls.
That's a good point, Dave. I think we may need to make this more of an annual statement to move from liquid application to granular for a period of time. Any products mentioned, folks? If you've never used them before, please reach out to us. Dr. Gardner, Dr. Shetlar, myself, Todd Hicks, all capable of answering anything about modes of action and safety. And if you have questions about those products, please feel free to reach out. We will see you next week, and hopefully no technical glitches.